Hey, today I wanted to talk about intelligence. It's complicated, to say the least. Specifically, though, there's a lot of different things that it could be iterated as. In this case, I wanted to define it as a difference. Wanted to define the difference between human intelligence, and humans and intelligence. It's probably a better way to say it. With the way that humans are today, 2014, was it October 2014, there's the dichotomy between what it means to have human intelligence and actual intelligence. So if you look at intelligence as a separately evolving system than the human monkey, the biological system that we are, the product of DNA and all these things, well, I guess saying that out loud, it sounds more direct than it actually is. Let me just say it this way. Intelligence and DNA and the human system are all part of one specific idea. They aren't anything in particular beyond a product of DNA. DNA in of itself is just a combination of proteins that aren't anything, like we don't even consider proteins as being alive when you really think about it, but we are just the imagination of what proteins think that we are. Something like that. The thing about intelligence is that it is a completely independent system that is a facet of individual decisions that are being made completely separate without a mind of what the intelligence system is as a whole. So an easy example is the internet. Computer systems are networked together to form the internet. It isn't a particular thing that someone say, let's make the internet today. It wasn't anything in that fashion, just like the human mind isn't a product of cells thinking, hey, let's make a human today, let's make Zach today, I wonder what he's going to think, I wonder what we're going to do. Like it doesn't work that way. They're just a network of signals that determine an outcome, and it just so happens to be that system is chaotic in nature. And when I say chaotic, I mean a system mathematically chaotic. There isn't a way to determine the outcome. You can't reverse engineer it. Is probably a better way to think about it. In a chaotic system, the outcome is so variant, and the factors change so rapidly, at least in a temporal sense, in a time fashion. Whereas that's the way that we experience it. So it's difficult to imagine otherwise. But the way that intelligence works in the human mind, when reverse engineered, cannot be constructed down to a single set of ideas, single set of neuron firing patterns. You could have an overall view, just like you could in a chaotic system, of what the what is it called, the attractor or the concrescence. You can have an idea of what this means from a neurobiological perspective. You can measure the brain activity. You can detect how many hertz or how many, I don't know if that's the actual word that they use. You can detect the amount of electricity, simply put, that is being output by the brain at a given time in a certain area to determine the function or the concept, general facility at which the human is behaving. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can tell what the person is thinking, and this is what I mean by the intelligence system is different from the biological system in a chaotic fashion. In that same way, that's what separates humans from intelligence. I believe, or at least in my personal experience, and I don't know if this is just me being who I am, or is just a product of what I decided to say, or just if it's rhetoric and it doesn't actually mean anything beyond just the words. But I think that you can develop a way to think or to believe. I don't think there's not a difference, but you can create a way to perceive that does indeed extract your actual literal intelligence from the way that you perceive the physical world as a biological being. It's sort of like becoming a computer, if you wanted to really think of it that way. It's not necessary, but it's an easy analogy. There are a lot of different aspects you can really get a complete grasp on when you aren't accounting for your own actions. Not in the way that you don't take responsibility, but if you wanted to analyze, say, well, if you were inside of a pool and you wanted to describe how the waves formed, you wouldn't be able to do so naturally without actually interacting with your surroundings and therefore altering the way that waves formed. Of course, in this case, that's actually a terrible analogy because you need waves to form in order to study waves. But if, like, you're in the ocean and you wanted to study how natural waves formed, I mean, that's kind of boring. Well, maybe not to wave scientists if that's a thing. But if you wanted to study how waves are formed, you would need to not interact with the waves in order to study them. In the same way that if you needed to study the way that your own behavior was affecting the way that other people's behavior was being affected, you need to remove your own self from that situation. But of course, if you're the one that's interacting with those people, it's kind of difficult to do, considering that, well, that's how you would get the information, the observer effect and all that good stuff. But if you were able to look at the situation as not an individual, but as a mind that is engaged in a situation just for the fact of observation, you can easily find out how it is that you are engaging in the situation and then adjust your perception accordingly. It's just a matter of really sort of gauging your own interaction based on what the results that you actually want are. It's not like it's a trick or anything, and it isn't a surefire way. It's just another way to control your variables in a chaotic equation. Yes, yeah. That's really all that it is, and that's what intelligence is in any sense of the word. And being able to manipulate the variables that you choose to manipulate rather than believing that the variables themselves are sort of like innate or fixed in any way. A lot of problem that I see personally with people thinking that things are or aren't smart, or that's a sort of like a descriptive word. The difference between people who think that things are or aren't intelligent, or people who think other people are or aren't smart, is a matter of how much they determine is or isn't finite. To me, a mark of intelligence would be someone who is able to determine whether or not a statement or an idea is or isn't potentially true. Not determining whether or not it's false is not the objective. Like, it's not the meat of the subject. Like, contemplating whether or not something that I'm saying right now is or isn't false. If the rhetoric is true, then the statement itself is true. Not defining the context of the specifics is a way to determine if intelligence is present, in the sense that the biological and the deterministic intelligence as separate entities, that's what I mean by determining if intelligence is present. And that's how you can really formulate an intelligent argument, and maybe in that particular way formulate a way to conserve novelty throughout a conversation. Like, in this case for me right now, this is fairly difficult in the sense that I don't have anything else to think of besides the things that I'm thinking about. There isn't anybody else here. It's kind of like my backyard, and it's sort of quiet besides animals and junk, so there's nothing really that's propelling my I just can't, like, there's certain points where it's hard for me to talk in this manner for a certain period of time like that. So yeah, damn it. But the bottom line here is that if there is anything that you are meaning to do, or if there is anything that you wish to be done, from a deterministic point of view, if you want it to be determined whether or not it can be done, the only way to do so is to do it in a way that you believe can be accomplished, but do it from a perspective that doesn't include you as the rewardee, as the rewarded person, the rewarded thing. You don't want to be rewarded. That's not the objective. If you do that, you'll be chasing the reward of doing it, reward rather than doing it. And there's sort of like a give and take in these type of situations. Well, I wouldn't even call it that, because then it seems like there's some sort of trade-off. Anything that is done in the current present form of the universe, the reality that we all experience, the oh my god, I'm alive type of sense, like all of those things are non-deterministic. It's all a chaotic system. You could be anybody and do anything if you had the right set of circumstances. And you can't have those circumstances occur if you don't do them. It's just that, it's straightforward. I mean, that's sort of how, like, you know, life propagates and things just happen to exist. It's nobody's fault. It wasn't determined. Like, we as humans, we just happen to be here. It's not as if somebody intended for us to evolve this way. We are a product of protein that just decides to evolve this way due to a set of circumstances that its ancestors, if protein has ancestors, that its ancestors just so happen to have. Like, it isn't as if it is magical, it's just time elapsing. Like, it's not horribly difficult to imagine. Like, I'm not saying that something is or isn't something, but I'm saying what actually had happened in the most basic sense of something. Like, it sounds arbitrary, but it's true in the least philosophical sense that it could be said, I think. Like, it's not whimsical. And the same, just life in general. Things aren't difficult. Life's not hard. Just observe things, say stuff. If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Evaluate it. Find out why it didn't make sense. Say it again. If it makes sense, then it makes sense. Problem solved. Do things that make sense. Don't do things that don't make sense. If you do things that don't make sense, find out why. And if it happened, it makes sense. Like, it's straightforward. Like, it just is what it is, because things that are happen. You don't have to analyze why or what or where or who or when or why or how or what. Just do it. Like, it's just like a thing. Yeah, duh. Intelligence. It's all it takes. Just separate, cohesion. Wait, separate, cohesion. That's the thing. Do it.